He called me the servant in the house I built with my own 2 hands. My daughter just watched, then told me to apologize. They thought they had broken me. They were about to find out that even old wood can burn. If you're listening to this, subscribe to the channel and let me know where you're watching from. It helps more than you know. My name is Arthur Reynolds, and I need to tell you how my sanctuary became my prison. The cold was the first thing. Always the cold. Not the crisp winter air I used to love with Mary, my wife. That cold felt alive. This was a damp, heavy cold. It lived in the concrete floor of the garage. It seeped through the thin, stained mattress and settled deep into my bones. My joints ached, a constant throbbing pain, a reminder that I was still alive, even when I wished I wasn't. For 35 years, I was a police captain. I upheld the law. I protected the vulnerable. I thought I had earned my rest. My dignity, now at 74, I was the vulnerable one. I was a prisoner. My jail cell was my daughter's 3-car garage. My warden was her husband, Mark. I shifted on the mattress. Pain shot up my side. Sharp, hot. My ribs felt bruised, maybe cracked. It happened 2 days ago. A simple request that turned violent. I had asked to use the shower inside. The real shower, not the freezing hose out back. Ice cold water on old skin. It hurt. Mark didn't like me asking questions. He didn't like me reminding him I was still human. He stood over me, his face twisted in disgust. "You think you deserve a hot shower?" he sneered. "While I pay for everything?" I tried to explain. The water was too cold. My arthritis, he didn't let me finish. He shoved me, hard. I lost my balance. My hip hit the edge of his heavy metal workbench. The sound of metal hitting bone echoed in the garage. I crashed to the concrete floor. The wind knocked out of me. "You need to learn your place, old man," he snarled. His face was inches from mine. I could smell the expensive coffee on his breath. Coffee I probably paid for. My daughter, Jessica, she watched from the doorway connecting the garage to the round, bright kitchen. I looked at her, pleading silently. "Help me." She never intervened. She just wrung her hands, a nervous habit she developed around Mark. "Mark, please," she whispered. Weak, pathetic. Then she disappeared. Back into the house. A house I had largely paid for. The door clicked shut. The sound of a prison cell locking. Hunger gnawed at my stomach. A hollow, aching pit. I couldn't remember the last time I felt full. They gave me scraps. Leftovers. Sometimes nothing at all, but the hunger was secondary to the shame. The shame was a heavy, suffocating blanket, thicker and more unbearable than the flimsy one I clutched around my shoulders. It smelled of old motor oil, dust, and something sour. The smell of my own neglect. The smell of failure. How did I end up here? How did the strong, respected Captain Arthur Reynolds dawn on this broken shadow of a man? It didn't happen overnight. It was a slow poisoning. It started when Mary died. 3 years ago, when she passed, it felt like the sun went out. She was my partner, my rock. The silence in our home was deafening. I was lost, adrift in a sea of grief. I couldn't function. Jessica and Mark insisted I move in with them. They were so persuasive, so seemingly caring. They painted a picture of family dinners, grandchildren running around, a loving home. "Dad, you can't be alone," Jessica had pleaded. Her eyes soft with sympathy. They looked like Mary's eyes. That's what broke me. "It's not safe. We have plenty of room. We'll look after you." I resisted at first. I valued my independence, but loneliness is a powerful motivator. It eats away at your resolve. It makes you desperate for connection. I agreed. I thought it was my future. I was actually funding my own destruction. I sold the house Mary and I had saved for decades to buy. Our home, our memories, all gone. I gave them most of the proceeds. Nearly $300,000 to help them upgrade to this sprawling suburban home, the one with the garage I now inhabited. It was supposed to be a new beginning, a fresh start for all of us. And I still had my pension. As a retired captain, it was significant. $7,000 a month. It was my security. Enough to ensure I was comfortable. Enough to ensure I was never a burden. I thought the money protected me. I was wrong. It was the bait that lured the shark. The change was gradual, insidious. It started with Mark offering to help me manage my finances. Mark was in investments, always talking about big deals, high returns. He wore expensive SIS and drove a BMW. I realized I probably paid for. He seemed competent, professional, trustworthy. "It's complicated, Arthur," he had said, his voice smooth as silk. He spread papers across the dining room table. That was back when I was still allowed at the dining room table. Taxes, investments, bills. "Let me handle the paperwork," he insisted. "You should be enjoying your retirement. We'll make sure everything is secure." I was tired. I was grieving. I missed Mary so much. My chest physically ached. I didn't want to deal with paperwork. I wanted to retreat with the world. I trusted my daughter's husband. He was family. I signed the papers. Power of attorney. I thought I was being responsible, easing the burden on my grieving mind. It was the biggest mistake of my life. I handed him the keys to my kingdom, and he locked me in the dungeon. First, the isolation began. My old friends from the force, guys like Tom Miller, my old partner, we used to talk every week. Suddenly, they stopped calling. I asked Mark about it. "Did Tom call?" "No, Arthur," Mark would say, shaking his head sadly. "They're busy. Life moves on. They probably think you need your rest." I later realized he had disconnected my phone. He changed my number. He told them I was declining, that I didn't want visitors. He was cutting me off from the world, building a wall around me. Then the moves started. The downgrades. I was moved from the spacious guest suite, the one with the private bathroom and the view of the garden. "We need the suite," Aunt Jessica explained. She avoided my eyes, always looking down at the floor. "Mark has important business associates visiting. We need to impress them." I was moved to the small office. It was cramped, stuffy, filled with Mark's dusty golf trophies, but it was inside the house. It was warm. Then 6 months ago, Mark said he needed the office. His expanding business required more space. He needed a place to work from home. That's when I ended up in the garage, next to the lawnmower and the recycling bin. They told me I was getting confused, that I was forgetting things, that I kept wandering off at night. "It's for your own safety, Dad," Jessica whispered, tears in her eyes. I think she almost believed the lies Mark fed her. Or maybe she just needed to believe them to live with herself. It wasn't true. I wasn't confused. I was terrified. But when you hear a lie often enough, whispered by your own daughter, a sliver of doubt creeps in. Maybe I was losing it. Maybe the grief had finally broken my mind. They broke my spirit before they broke my body. And that was the real betrayal. I was drifting, in and out of a restless sleep, the cold pulling me under, dreaming of Mary, dreaming of warmth. Then I heard it, the crunch of tires on the driveway. It wasn't the throaty roar of Mark's BMW. This engine was quieter, smoother. A rental car, maybe. I struggled to sit up. My joints screamed in protest. My breath hitched in my chest, pain radiating from my ribs. They never had visitors. Mark discouraged it. He said it upset my routine. The real reason, he didn't want anyone to see his dirty secret. He didn't want anyone to see me. The garage door rattled. It began to rise, flooding the dark, oily space with blinding afternoon light. I squinted, raising a trembling hand to shield my eyes. A silhouette stood there, tall and broad, a familiar shape, a shape I hadn't seen in too long. "Dad?" The voice hit me like a physical blow. It winded me. Tears sprang to my eyes. It was David, my son. David lived across the country. Seattle. He was a corporate lawyer, successful, always busy, always working on a big case. We talked on the phone, but he hadn't visited in almost 2 years. I always told him everything was wonderful, that Jessica and Mark were taking great care of me. I was too proud, too ashamed. I couldn't tell my son that his sister had let this happen, that I had let this happen. "Dad, is that you?" David rushed forward, his expensive shoes clicking on the concrete, his eyes adjusting to the gloom. I tried to speak. My throat was dry, raw. I could only manage a weak, rattling cough. "David," I whispered. The sound was pathetic, weak. The voice of a broken man. David knelt beside the mattress. I saw his face clearly now. His expression shifted, from confusion to disbelief. Then to a cold, hard fury I recognized immediately. It was the same look I used to have, when facing down a suspect who thought they were above the law. The look that said the game is over. "My God, Dad, what happened to you?" He took it all in. The filthy mattress, the thin blanket, the bucket in the corner, the one I was forced to use as a toilet. The indignity of it burned hotter than the shame. He saw the bruises on my arms, the sunken look of my cheeks. He saw how frail I had become, how small. I had a fall, I lied. The words automatic, rehearsed. Mark had trained me well. I hated myself for saying them. "A fall, Dad? You look like you're starving." His voice was tight, controlled. The lawyer analyzing the scene. "You're freezing." He quickly took off his heavy wool coat, draped it over my shoulders. The warmth was immediate, overwhelming. It was the first real warmth I had felt in months. The first act of kindness. "Why are you living in the garage?" He stood up, his voice rising with disbelief and anger. "This is insane. We shouldn't be living like this." He paused, the financial aspect hitting him. "You have a pension, $7,000 a month. Where is the money?" Just then, the door connecting the garage to the house swung open. The timing was too perfect. "What's all the racket out here?" Mark stood there, holding a crystal glass filled with expensive-looking whiskey. He wore a silk shirt, designer jeans, a Rolex watch glinting on his wrist. "Clothes bought with my money." He stopped when David. His composure slipped. Just for a fraction of a second, I saw the fear in his eyes. Raw panic. Then it was gone, replaced by the usual arrogance. "David, what a surprise," Mark said, his voice smooth. "Oily, you should have called. We would have prepared a room." David turned on him, his voice dangerously low. "A predator assessing its prey. What is my father doing in the garage, Mark?" Mark took a sip from his glass, regaining his arrogant posture. He leaned against the doorframe, casual, relaxed. He smiled. A sickeningly smug grin, the grin of a man who thinks he's untouchable. That Arthur prefers it out here," Mark lied smoothly, effortlessly. "It's quieter. Besides, his dementia is getting worse. It's safer for everyone. Dementia." The word hit me like a slap. He said it so casually, so convincingly. He was destroying my reputation, even to my own son. "Dementia? He's bruised and hungry," David accused, stepping closer to Mark. "He looks like a prisoner of war. You're stealing his money, aren't you?" Mark didn't even flinch. He walked further into the garage, looking down at me with contempt, like I was something disgusting stuck to his shoe. "Stealing is such an ugly word, David," he said proudly, his voice dripping with arrogance. He wasn't ashamed. He was bragging. "I prefer managing his assets." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. He wanted David to understand the full extent of his control. He wanted to rub his face in it. "And let's be clear," he puffed out his chest, thumped it with his thumb. "That pension belongs to me. I'm taking it all. I take care of him, don't I?" He gestured around the garage. The irony was on him. He truly believed he deserved my money. "This lifestyle," he continued, gesturing toward the house. "The upkeep on this house, the private schools for the kids, it all costs money. Consider it my fee for babysitting the old man." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Behind him, Jessica appeared in the doorway, her face pale, anxious. She looked at me, then quickly looked away, guilt written all over her face. David stared at Mark. He didn't yell. He didn't scream. His face became very still, a terrifying calm settling over him. The calm before the storm. Slowly, deliberately, David reached up and took off his watch. It was an expensive smartwatch, thick and gleaming silver, a gift I had given him when he made partner. I thought he was going to hit Mark. I braced myself for the explosion, The violence I knew David was capable of when pushed too far. But David didn't move toward Mark. He just held the watch in his hand. Looked Mark straight in the eye. Perfectly legal, huh? David's voice was quiet now, but it carried a weight that made the air crackle. The sound of authority. Mark laughed. A dry, unpleasant sound.
Yes.
It is. I have power of attorney. Signed and notarized. The law is on my side. Now get out of my garage. He thought he had won. He thought he had won. He thought he had us beat. He underestimated David, and he underestimated the power of the truth. David tapped the face of his watch. The small screen lit up. You know, the funny thing about technology, David said, his voice conversational, almost friendly. Is that it? Captures everything? You see, Mark, I started recording the moment I confronted you. He tapped the watch again, and then clear as day Mark's own voice echoed in the garage. The confession, arrogant and proud. That pension belongs to me. I'm taking it all. Mark's face turned white. The blood drained from his cheeks. The glass in his hand trembled. He looked like he was going to be sick. You can't use that, he sputtered. The arrogance gone, replaced by fear. It's illegal recording. You can't record someone without their consent. This is a setup. As a lawyer, Mark, I can tell you it's absolutely admissible, David said, his voice cold as steel, especially when documenting a crime in progress. Which this is? He paused, letting the words sink in. Elder abuse is a felony, Mark. A serious felony. The tables had turned. The power dynamic shifted. Mark was no longer the warden. He was the inmate. Now, David said, his voice firm, let's get Dad inside. David helped me up. I was shaky, weak, but his strength supported me. I leaned on him, feeling a surge of hope. Maybe this nightmare was finally over. We walked toward the kitchen door. Mark stepped in front of us, blocking the way. Desperation, making him bold. He was like a cornered animal. He's not coming into my house, Mark snarled, his mask slipping, the monster underneath revealing itself. He's filthy. He smells. It's his house, too. He paid for it, David said, his voice low and dangerous. He didn't push Mark. He didn't have to. His presence was enough. Move, or I will move you. Mark hesitated. He saw the look in David's eyes, the unwavering determination. The promise of violence if he didn't comply. He realized he was facing a different kind of fight now. One he couldn't win with brute force or bullying. Reluctantly, he stepped aside. The bully backing down, stepping into the house was a shock to the system. It was warm, overly heated. It smelled of expensive scented candles, and something rich cooking in the oven. Roast beef, maybe. The luxury was overwhelming. Obscene, new leather furniture, massive modern artwork, thick plush carpets. It was a monument to greed, built on my suffering. It made me sick to my stomach. David guided me to the kitchen table, gently helped me into a chair. I sank into the soft cushion. Relief washed over me. I hadn't sat in a real chair in months. Jessica, get him some food. Now, David ordered, his voice leaving no room for argument. Jessica hesitated, looking nervously at Mark. Still afraid of him, still under his control. It disgusted me. He can have soup later, Mark said dismissively. He checked his watch. We have venison tonight. I don't want him making a mess. Reservations. While I starved in the garage. The cruelty was breathtaking. David ignored him. He walked to the refrigerator. It was packed with gourmet food. Organic vegetables, expensive cheeses, things I hadn't seen in years. He pulled out some chicken, bread, and fruit. He made me a sandwich, poured me a glass of milk, set it in front of me. I ate ravenously. The simple food tasting better than anything I could remember. Tears streamed down my face. Tears of relief. Tears of gratitude. I couldn't top them as I ate. Mark hovered nearby, his face red with anger. He couldn't stand seeing me treated like a human being. He waited until I finished the last bite before speaking. He couldn't let me have a moment of peace. You think you've accomplished something, David? Mark sneered. You think that recording means anything? He leaned closer, his voice dripping with venom. I have the power of attorney. It's signed, notarized, and ironclad. I control his care. I control his finances. I decide what he eats and where he sleeps. He wasn't giving up. He was doubling down. He still thought he could win. The courts will side with me, he continued. They'll see a confused old man and his responsible son-in-law. Your little recording? It proves nothing. It's your word against mine. David sat down across from me, his expression grave. He knew Mark wasn't entirely wrong. The law is complicated. Justice isn't always swift. He might be right, Dad, David whispered so Mark couldn't hear. The POA is a serious obstacle. To revoke it, we have to prove you are competent or that he is severely abusing his power. He looked at my frail body, my trembling hands, given your physical condition. David said, his voice heavy with concern, and the narrative he's built about your dementia, that's going to be a fight. A long, ugly fight. The hope that had flared in my chest flickered, began to die. Mark was smart, cunning. He had covered his tracks. The POA felt like a steel trap. I had signed my own death warrant. I'm not crazy, David, I said, the words catching in my throat. I'm just tired. So tired. I know that, Dad. But we need evidence. Hard evidence. The recording is good, but it's not enough to dismantle his control over your finances. We need proof that he's stealing from you. And we need it fast. The fight wasn't over. It had just begun. And Mark was about to escalate the war. Later that afternoon, the battle lines were drawn. I was resting in the guest suite, the same suite I had been kicked out of months ago. The sheets were silk. It felt strange against my skin. Mark approached me, holding a small paper cup with pills in it, his secret weapon, the tools he used to keep me compliant. Time for Arthur's medication, Mark announced, his voice overly cheerful. A performance for David's benefit. Jessica stood behind him, pale and anxious, a silent accomplice. I shrank back against the pillows. Those pills. I knew what they did. They always made me foggy, sleepy, confused. I realized now they were probably sedatives, maybe antipsychotics, meant to keep me weak, to make his story about my dementia seem true. He was drugging me. My own son-in-law was poisoning me. What are those? David appeared in the doorway. He had heard Mark's voice. Protective, vigilant. His prescription? For his anxiety and confusion, Mark said smoothly. He was a practiced liar. He needs them. If he doesn't take them, he gets agitated. Sometimes violent. No, I whispered, my voice stronger now, fueled by anger. They make me sick. They make my head feel heavy. He doesn't know what he's saying, Mark insisted, trying to press the cup into my hand. His grip was tight, painful. David stepped between us. He took the cup from Mark, examined the pills. Small, white, deadly. I want to see the prescription bottles, David demanded, and the name of the doctor who prescribed them. Now, Mark hesitated, his eyes darting toward the hallway, thinking, calculating. I knew that look. The look of a guilty man trying to find an escape route. They're in the upstairs safe, he lied. I don't want him getting into them. He might overdose. Accidentally. The threat was clear. He was capable of anything. Go get them. I'll wait, David said, crossing his arms. He wasn't backing down. Mark glared at him, realizing he was trapped. Fine. He stormed upstairs. We heard him stomping around, slamming drawers, a childish tantrum. He returned a few minutes later, slammed the bottles onto the bedside table. David examined them, his expression darkening. They were strong antipsychotics, drugs used for serious mental illness, prescribed by a doctor I had never heard of. Dr. Alan Evans. We're getting a second opinion, David said firmly. He walked into the bathroom, tossed the pills Mark had given him into the toilet, flushed them. The sound of the water rushing away felt like a victory. Then he locked the bottles in his briefcase. Taking control of the evidence, Mark's eyes flashed with fury. He clenched his fists. I thought he might attack David, but he backed down. He knew David had the upper hand. For now, if he has an episode, Mark spat. If he wanders off, if he gets hurt, it's on you. He was already building his defense, painting David as the reckless one. David spent the next day investigating. He was a corporate lawyer, used to digging through financial records, but Mark had been thorough. He tried to access my bank accounts online. The passwords had been changed. He called my bank, the local branch near the house. They told him that Mark Peterson was the only authorized person on the account. Power of attorney. He was completely locked out. Mark had constructed my prison meticulously, brick by digital brick, but David didn't give up. He started documenting everything. He took pictures of the bruises on my arms, the mattress in the garage, the bucket, evidence of the abuse. He walked around the house, taking inventory of the lavish lifestyle. The new Mercedes in the driveway, the designer clothes in Jessica's closet, the receipts for expensive dinners left carelessly on the counter. He was building a picture of their spending, contrasted with the squalor I was living in. It was circumstantial, but it was a start. If this story is hitting close to home, or if you believe in justice, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe. It helps us share these stories and reminds us that we're not alone in this fight. Jessica avoided us both, claiming she had a headache, hiding in her room. But David cornered her in the kitchen that evening. I sat in the living room, listening, their voices hushed, angry, the sound of my family tearing itself apart. "You shouldn't be doing this, David," Jessica said, her voice trembling. "You're making everything worse." Mark is furious. Worse? How could it be worse than starving in a garage? He says he'll have Dad committed if you keep interfering. She threatened, her voice weak, but the threat real. Worse? Jessica, he was starving in the garage. Mark is drugging him. "Did you know about the pills?" David's voice was raw with disbelief. Silence. A long, heavy silence. A confession in itself. He said it was to calm him down. She whispered. "Dad was difficult. Difficult. Because I was grieving. Because I was lonely. Difficult." David exploded. He was grieving Mom. He needed support, not sedation. "You don't understand." Her voice rose hysterically. "You left. You moved across the country. I was the one who had to take care of him. It was exhausting. The resentment, the bitterness, it poured out of her. She blamed me for her unhappiness in Mark's business. It's been struggling," she continued, the real reason finally coming out. "We needed the money. We have bills, the kids' tuition, the mortgage. He has $7,000 a month." David shot back. "That's more than enough. Mark is bleeding him dry. He's buying new cars while Dad eats scraps." He paused, his voice softening slightly, trying to reach her. "Why are you defending him, Jess? Why are you letting him destroy Dad?" "Because he's my husband," she cried. "Because this is my life. I like this house. I like not having to worry." A confession hung in the air. Ugly. Raw, selfish. "You can't just come in and destroy everything we've built," she sobbed. She ran upstairs. I watched her go, my heart aching. She had chosen this lifestyle over me, over her own father. Mary would have been devastated to see what our daughter had become. Greed and fear had twisted her into someone I didn't recognize. The confrontation with Jessica shook me. The betrayal cut deeper than anything Mark had done. She was little girl, my blood, but it also cleared some of the fog in my mind. The drugs were wearing off. David's presence, the warmth of the house, the regular meals, they were bringing me back to life. I felt the old strength returning. The police captain emerging from the broken old man, my mind sharpening, analyzing the situation, looking for weaknesses, and I realized Mark was escalating. He knew David was a threat, and he was going to fight dirty. He was cornered, and cornered animals are the most dangerous. The next morning the attack came. A car pulled up to the house, a sleek, black sedan. A man in a suit, carrying a medical bag, stepped out. "Who is that?" I asked David. "We were having breakfast. Real breakfast. Eggs and toast." David looked out the window, his expression darkening. "Dr. Evans, the one prescribing those antipsychotics." He pulled out his phone, started typing furiously. I looked him up last night, David said, his voice tight with anger. His license has been suspended twice, for ethics violations. He's a hired gun, a pill pusher for hire. Mark must be paying him a fortune. Mark greeted the man at the door, smiling warmly, shaking his hand vigorously, like old friends. He led him into the living room, the executioner arriving for his appointment. "Arthur, this is Dr. Evans," Mark said, his voice dripping with false concern. "He's the specialist I told you about. He's here to do an evaluation, just to make sure you're getting the best care possible." I realized what was happening. This was his endgame, the nuclear option. Mark was trying to have me officially declared incompetent. If a doctor certified that I was mentally unfit, the power of attorney would be impossible to revoke, and Mark could have me committed, shipped off to a state home, silencing me forever, while he drained the rest of my assets. It was a death sentence. "I don't want an evaluation," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I gripped the arms of the chair, my knuckles white. "It's just a formality, Arthur," Dr. Evans said soothingly. His voice was oily, patronizing. He opened his bag, pulled a clipboard. "Just a few questions. What day is it today? Who is the president?" David stepped forward. He placed himself between me and the doctor, a human shield. "My father is refusing the evaluation," David said, his voice clear, authoritative. "You need to leave." "I'm afraid it's not up to him," Dr. Evans said. He looked at Mark, who nodded encouragingly. Smugly, "Mr. Peterson has medical power of attorney. He has the authority to request this evaluation, and given the reports of his confusion and wandering, he was reading from the script Mark had given him. "I am my father's lawyer," David said. He pulled out his business card, handed it to the doctor. "And I am challenging that power of attorney due to clear evidence of abuse, illegal drugging, and fraud." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Until the matter is settled in court, any evaluation conducted under these circumstances will be considered coerced and inadmissible. Furthermore," David added, "I have reason to believe you have been prescribing dangerous medications without ever examining the patient." The threat hung in the air. Heavy, potent. Malpractice, fraud, criminal charges. Dr. Evans hesitated. He clearly knew this was unethical, illegal. Mark had probably paid him handsomely. But money wasn't worth his career. "His freedom. I have a legal right to be here," Dr. Evans insisted. But his voice wavered. He started putting the clipboard back in his bag, the confidence draining out of him. "If you proceed," David said, his voice low and dangerous, "I will not only ensure your license is permanently revoked by the medical board, but I will sue you personally. I will own your practice. I will own your house. I will destroy you." Dr. Evans looked at Mark. Mark was nodding frantically for him to proceed. But the risk was too great. The doctor wasn't going to risk everything for Mark's scheme. He closed his bag, the snap of the latch echoing in the silent room. "I will be contacting my lawyer," Dr. Evans said stiffly. He turned and walked out the door. The black sedan sped away, a hasty retreat. Mark was furious. His face was purple with rage. He slammed his fist against the wall. The house shook. "You can't keep doing this, David," he screamed. "You're obstructing his care. I'll have a judge order the evaluation. I'll have you arrested for interference." "Go ahead," David said calmly. "Call the police. I'd love to show them the pictures from the garage." Mark stormed off to his office, slammed the door. We could hear him shouting into the phone. We were winning the small battles, but we were losing the war. David still couldn't access the finances. Mark was still in control. The clock was ticking. I felt a wave of despair wash over me. We were trapped by the very laws I had sworn to uphold. "We're missing something," David said. He was pacing the living room late that night. Mark and Jessica had gone out, claiming they needed a break from the stress. "Probably spending my money." "He's too confident," David continued. "Even after the doctor left, he must have a way to explain the missing money. Something solid. Something that makes the transfers look legitimate." That's when I remembered. a detail from the past. Something small, insignificant, something Mark had overlooked because he underestimated me. And he underestimated Mary. David, I said, my voice weak but clear. The safety deposit box. David stopped pacing. What safety deposit box? Before I moved in here, when I still had my house, Mary and I had a safety deposit box. At the old bank downtown, the one on Main Street, the one we opened 40 years ago. David frowned. Did you close it out when you sold the house? I don't think so, I said, trying to remember. The fog was still thick in places. Mark handled the move. He said he consolidated all the accounts, but he only dealt with the local branch near here. I paused, the memory sharpening, the fog clearing. I never gave him the key. I don't think he knows about it. Mary always handled that account. Hope flared in David's eyes, a spark in the darkness. Where's the key, Dad? Do you still have it? I closed my eyes, trying to picture my old study, the way Mary organized everything. Meticulous, careful. She labeled everything. It was taped, I said, the image clear now, taped to the back of the frame of Mom's favorite painting. The watercolor of the lighthouse. The lighthouse, our beacon of hope. Where's the painting now? David asked, his voice urgent. In the attic, I think. I looked around the living room. The modern art mocked me, cold, impersonal. Mark said it was ugly, didn't match the decor. He had erased Mary from the house, just like he was trying to erase me. David looked up at the ceiling. Mark and Jessica were still out. The house was silent. We have to get it. Now, David said. We moved quietly, carefully climbing the stairs to the attic access panel. In the hallway, my legs trembling, my heart pounding in my chest. The adrenaline fueling me. David pushed the panel open. Dust rained down. He climbed into the dark space. I waited below, holding my breath. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a gunshot. The attic was filled with the remnants of my past life. Boxes of photos, old furniture, memories packed away and forgotten. Discarded, just like me. I heard the sound of the front door opening. Laughter. Mark and Jessica were home. David, I hissed out. I heard him freeze in the attic. What's that noise? Mark called out. His voice slurred slightly. He had been drinking. That made him even more unpredictable. I had to distract him. I walked toward the top of the stairs, made myself look confused. Weak, playing the part Mark had created for me. Mark, I called out, my voice shaking. I think I'm lost. I can't find the bathroom. Mark sighed impatiently. He appeared at the bottom of the stairs, Jessica behind him. It's right there, old man, he said, pointing down the hallway, his voice dripping with contempt. Are you blind as well as crazy? He looked up at the attic panel. It was slightly ajar. Why is the attic open? He asked, suspicious, his eyes narrowing. I don't know, I lied. I heard a noise. Maybe raccoons. Mark stared at me for a long moment, trying to decide if I was telling the truth, trying to decide if I was smart enough to lie. Finally, he shrugged. I'll deal with it tomorrow, he said dismissively. Go to bed, Arthur. He waited until I went back to my room. Closed the door. I heard them go into their bedroom. Their door slammed shut. A moment later, David emerged from the attic covered in dust, holding the painting, the lighthouse, a triumphant smile on his face. We quickly went downstairs to the kitchen, our hands trembling. Taped to the back of the frame, hidden under the brown paper backing, was a small brass key, tarnished, but recognizable. The key to everything. The next morning, David went to the bank on Main Street. He was gone for hours. I waited anxiously, pacing the living room, praying that the box was still there, that it held something useful, something that could break Mark's control. Mark watched me, suspicious, but he didn't say anything. He was busy on the phone, talking in hushed tones about liquidity and margins. He sounded nervous. When David returned, his face was grim, but his eyes were blazing, a fierce light I hadn't seen before. Righteous fury. He carried a thick, worn leather briefcase. My old briefcase, the one I took to the precinct every day. He sat down and opened it on the coffee table. Mark walked into the room. "What's this?" Mark asked, curious, trying to sound casual. "Old police files?" "Something like that," David said, his voice tight with suppressed fury. "Evidence." He pulled out a stack of documents. "The box was still there, Dad," he said. "Mark never knew. Your original will was in there, the one that leaves everything to me. And Jessica equally. Not the forged one. Mark probably has in his safe." He paused. "But that's not what matters right now." He pulled out another stack of papers. These looked newer, but the paper felt expensive. Heavy stock. "Mom kept everything, didn't she?" David said, a sad smile touching his lips. "She was meticulous," I whispered. "She kept records of the loan she gave Mark 10 years ago," David explained, "to start his investment business. The original promissory note. I had forgotten about that. Mary had loaned him $50,000. He paid it back, eventually, or so I thought. It seems Mark used those old documents as a template," David said, his voice growing colder. He looked at Mark, who was starting to look nervous, the sweat glistening on his forehead. "He forged your signature on these." He held up several promissory notes, totaling over $400,000, claiming I had loaned him money over the past 2 years. "But I didn't," I said, confused. "He was taking my money, not borrowing it." "I know," David said, "but this is why he was so confident. He created a paper trail to justify the missing funds. If anyone questioned the transfers, he could claim the money was a legitimate loan, not theft. He was covering his tracks. It was brilliant. Diabolical. He was laundering the money through me." Mark scoffed, trying to regain his composure. "That's ridiculous. Arthur signed those. He just forgot." "Like he forgets everything. You can't prove forgery." "Actually, I can," David said, "because Mom kept the original note. The handwriting experts will have a field day with these." Then David dropped the real bombshell, the twist that changed everything. The truth that was darker and more sinister than I could have imagined. "Dad, Mark isn't just stealing from you." David stood up. He looked Mark straight in the eye. "He's running a Ponzi scheme." I stared at him, unable to comprehend. I knew what a Ponzi scheme was, from my days on the force. It was a massive fraud. A house of cards built on lies and greed. "A Ponzi scheme," I whispered. The words felt foreign on my tongue. "His investment business is a sham," David explained. The documents in the safety deposit box included old financial statements from Mark's company. David had used them, along with the evidence of forgery, to gain emergency access to the broader financial picture. He had contacts, resources. He's been taking money from investors, David continued. A lot of them, people from the community, the country club, promising huge returns. He was using the new money to pay off the old investors. The classic structure, the inevitable collapse. But the market turned, David said. He couldn't get enough new capital. The whole thing started to unravel. That's when he turned to me, to my pension, my saving. He started using your money to cover the gaps, David said, his voice filled with disgust. He's drowning in debt, Dad. He's desperate, and he's about to collapse. The scale of it was staggering. It wasn't just me. Other people were being ruined by Mark's greed. Innocent people. This explained his arrogance, his cruelty. He wasn't just a petty thief. He was a drowning man, pulling me down with him. Mark was screaming now. "Lies! These are all lies. You fabricated those documents. You're trying to ruin me. We have him," David said, ignoring Mark, a grim satisfaction in his voice. "This is enough, not just to revoke the power of attorney, but to put him in jail for a very long time." He looked at Mark. "This goes beyond elder abuse. This is federal fraud. I'm contacting the FBI. Mark lunged at David, but I stepped between them, the old cop instinct kicking in. "Protecting my son." "Get out of my house," Mark screamed, pointing at the door. His face contorted with rage. "It's not your house, Mark," I said, my voice strong, clear, the voice of Captain Reynolds. "It's mine, and you're done." The realization that Mark was cornered made him even more dangerous. A cornered animal is unpredictable, vicious. The failed evaluation, the discovery of the Ponzi scheme. He knew the walls were closing in. He knew his time was running out. And that desperation finally broke Jessica. David knew we needed her cooperation to ensure Mark couldn't twist the narrative further, couldn't claim I was in on the scheme, couldn't use me as a shield. He confronted her one last time that evening. Mark was hiding in his office, making frantic calls, trying to move money, trying to find a way out. But it was too late. This time, David didn't hold back. He laid it all out. The evidence, the forged promissory notes, the offshore accounts David had tracked down, the list of investors Mark had defrauded. "He's going to jail, Jessica?" David said, his voice tired but firm. We were in the kitchen. I was sitting at the table, watching my children's lives unravel. "The FBI is involved now. I spoke to an Agent Jenkins this afternoon. They are already monitoring his accounts." "It's over." He paused, letting the reality sink in. "And if you keep protecting him," David continued, "if you lie about what he did to Dad, you're going down with him as an accessory. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Elder abuse. He delivered the final blow, the one that shattered her denial. You will lose your children. They will go into the system. Or maybe I'll take them, but you will never see them again." Jessica stared at the documents, her face pale, her hands shaking. The lifestyle she had sacrificed her father for was a lie, a house of cards, and it was collapsing. "I didn't know about the Ponzi scheme," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I swear I didn't know. He told me the investments were doing well." "But you knew about the garage," David pressed, his voice relentless. "You knew he was starving Dad. You knew he was drugging him. You knew he was hurting him." She collapsed onto the sofa, sobbing uncontrollably. The guilt, the shame, the fear, it all came crashing down on her. "I was scared," she choked out. "He threatened me. He said if I told anyone, he would ruin me. He said he would take the kids. I didn't want to lose everything." "You already lost everything that mattered, Jessica," David said, his voice heavy with sorrow. "You lost your integrity. You lost your father." Her sobs grew louder. She looked at me, her eyes filled with guilt and shame, pleading for forgiveness. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, Daddy." I said nothing. The pain was too raw, the betrayal too deep. She had a choice to make: stay silent and face the consequences, or help us and try to find some measure of redemption. Finally, she looked up, her eyes red and swollen, but resolute. "What do you need me to do?" The climax arrived not with a bang, but with the glittering facade of a lavish dinner party. Mark, realizing he was running out of time, but still oblivious to the extent of the investigation closing in on him, had planned this event weeks ago. He said it was to celebrate a new business deal. But David knew the truth. It was a desperate attempt to maintain the facade of success, to secure new investors, enough cash to potentially flee the country. David decided to use the opportunity to strike while the iron was hot, to expose Mark in front of everyone. He called Agent Jenkins at the FBI. He also called my old partner from the force, Captain Tom Miller, now the precinct commander. A good man, a loyal friend. It was time to bring in the cavalry. That evening, the house was filled with people, investors, neighbors, local politicians. The smell of expensive catering filled the air. Music played softly. It felt obscene, a celebration of greed and deceit. Mark was in his element, charming, confident, the picture of success. He wore a tuxedo. He moved through the crowd, shaking hands, laughing loudly. I sat in a chair in the corner, dressed in clothes David had bought me, a new suit. It felt stiff, uncomfortable. I felt stronger, cleaner. But the tension in the room was suffocating. I knew what was coming. The storm was about to break. Jessica stood by the fireplace, looking pale and drawn. She kept glancing at the door, waiting for the inevitable. Mark stood at the center of the room, champagne glass in hand, ready to make a toast. "To the future," he said smiling broadly. His teeth white and perfect. To new ventures and endless prosperity. The guests raised their glasses. Cheers! Just then, the doorbell rang. Mark frowned. Annoyed by the interruption, he motioned for a waiter to get the door. But David was already there. He opened the door. Agent Jenkins and another man in a suit stood there. FBI agents. Behind them was Captain Miller. In full uniform, the sight of the uniform filled me with pride and sorrow. Mark's smile faltered, the mask slipping. David, Tom, what is this? We're having a party. I know, David said, walking into the house. The agents followed him. Captain Miller stayed by the door, blocking the exit. The guests turned to watch. The music stopped abruptly. The room fell silent, the atmosphere shifting from celebration to confrontation. I thought it was perfect time to clear the air about Mark's investments, David said, his voice loud and clear, the voice of a prosecutor, delivering his closing argument. Clear the air about what? Mark asked, trying to maintain his composure, but his voice betrayed his panic. He was sweating, his eyes darting around the room, looking for an escape route. David walked over to the center of the room, addressing the guests. I apologize for the interruption, he said, but there are some things you need to know about the man whose success you are celebrating. Mark Peterson is a fraud. Gasps echoed through the room. David laid out the evidence concisely, devastatingly. The Ponzi scheme, the forged promissory notes, the stolen pension, the hidden accounts. Agent Jenkins stepped forward. She held up her badge. My name is Agent Sarah Jenkins, FBI, she announced, her voice calm and authoritative. We have reason to believe Mr. Peterson has been operating a fraudulent investment scheme. If you have invested money with him, please stay. We will need to take your statements. Some of the guests looked angry, realizing they had been duped. Others looked horrified, realizing their life savings were gone. The realization spreading like a virus through the room. Mark was screaming, denying everything. He's lying. This is a conspiracy. He's jealous of my success. He pointed at me, his voice dripping with contempt. My father-in-law is senile, and my brother-in-law is vindictive. They're trying to ruin me. And what about the abuse, Mark? David's voice cut through the noise. He walked over to the large television screen mounted on the wall, plugged in his phone. He held up the pictures he had taken of me in the garage, bruised, starving, lying on the filthy mattress. The images flashed on the screen. Stark, undeniable. The truth laid bare for everyone to see. The room fell silent, horrified. I saw some of the guests cover their mouths, tears in their eyes. He's confused, Mark sputtered, his face red and sweating, the desperation making him sloppy. He hurts himself. I was protecting him. I was taking care of him. He looked around the room, desperate for support, for someone to believe his lies. Ask Jessica. Tell them, Jessica. He turned to Jessica, who was standing by the fireplace, trembling, her face stained with tears. Jessica looked at Mark, her eyes filled with fear and anguish. Then she looked at me. Our eyes met. A silent conversation passing between us. Forgiveness, regret, sorrow. She took a deep breath, stepped forward. Mark was stealing from my father, she said, her voice shaking but clear. Loud enough for everyone to hear. He kept him in the garage. He starved him. He drugged him. She paused, looked Mark straight in the eye. He hit him. It's all true. The confession hung in the air, heavy, damning, the final nail in Mark's coffin. Mark lunged at her, his face contorted with rage, the monster fully unleashed. You lying witch! You set me up. You'll pay for this. Before he could reach her, Captain Miller and the FBI agents grabbed him. They spun him around, forced his hands behind his back. The sound of the handcuffs clicking shut was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. Mark Peterson, Agent Jenkins said, you are under arrest for securities fraud, wire fraud, theft, and elder abuse. Captain Miller looked at me, his expression softening. We had worked together for 20 years. He was more than a colleague. He was family. Arthur? My God, Captain, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I'm so sorry I didn't know. It's okay, Tom, I said. You know now. Mark struggled as they handcuffed him, shouting threats and curses, a pathetic display of a man who had lost everything. As they led him toward the door, David tapped his watch one last time, playing the recording for the entire room to hear. Mark's own voice, arrogant and proud, echoed through the silent room. A final humiliation. That pension belongs to me. I'm taking it all. The aftermath was messy, public. The story was front-page news. The captain in the garage. The scandal rocked the community. The FBI seized all of Mark's assets. The house, the cars, the bank accounts, the expensive furniture, all of it gone. The Ponzi scheme collapsed, leaving a trail of ruined lives and shattered dreams. The investigation revealed that he had stolen millions. The sheer scale of his cruelty and greed was staggering. Mark never stood a chance in court. The evidence was overwhelming. Jessica's testimony sealed his fate. He was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. He would die there, alone and forgotten. Jessica pleaded guilty to negligence and complicity in the elder abuse. She avoided jail time due to her cooperation and testimony against Mark, but she lost everything. The lifestyle she had coveted, the respect of the community. She lost custody of her children for a time. Having to prove her fitness as a parent, she had to move into a small apartment, take a minimum wage job. The fall from grace was steep and painful. The glittering life she had sacrificed me for was gone. I haven't seen her since the night of the party. She writes me letters, long, rambling letters, filled with guilt, begging for forgiveness. I read them, but I haven't responded yet. The wound is too deep, the betrayal too profound. When I see the image of her standing in the doorway of the garage, watching as her husband destroyed me, I don't know if forgiveness is possible. She was my daughter, but she stood by while I was broken. Maybe one day, but not today. I moved in with David, in Seattle. His house is bright, airy, filled with the sound of laughter and the smell of home cooking. I have a room overlooking the garden, warm, comfortable. My physical wounds healed, the bruises faded, the weight returned, the nightmares slowly receded. The fog in my mind cleared. The emotional healing, however, was a much longer journey. Therapy helped. David's unwavering support helped even more. I started volunteering at a local community center, mentoring young police recruits, sharing my experience, my wisdom. I found purpose again. In the law I had served my whole life. I realized I still had something to offer. I was Captain Reynolds again. A few months later, we were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. David was reading the newspaper. I was sipping a cup of coffee. The silence between us was comfortable, filled with understanding, healing. I still can't believe the darkness in him, David said, shaking his head. The sheer arrogance, to think he could get away with it. Greed makes people blind, David, I said, looking out at the garden. It makes them believe their own lies. They think money is power. They forget that the truth always comes out, eventually. It's the law of nature and the law of man. I thought about Mark, sitting in a cold prison cell, his wealth and power stripped away, leaving only the reality of his actions. I thought about Jessica, struggling to rebuild her life, haunted by the consequences of her choices. And I thought about myself, a retired police captain, who had faced the darkness in his own family and survived. David reached over and put his hand on my arm. His touch was warm, reassuring.
I'm just glad I came when I did, Dad, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I'm so sorry I let it go on for so long. You saved me, David, I said.
Tears welling up in my eyes. You brought me back into the light. You reminded me who I am. I realized then that true wealth isn't measured in dollars and cents. It's not found in sprawling houses or expensive cars. My $7,000 pension was just money, but the love and loyalty of my son, that was priceless. It's found in the strength to fight for what is right, even when the world seems dark. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I took a deep breath. The air was clean and crisp. The cold of the garage was a distant memory. replaced by the warmth of my son's love. I was safe, I was cherished, and for the first time in a long time, I knew I was finally home. Thanks for listening. If this story touched your heart, please rate it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. Your support means the world, because your time matters.